Outside Steve's house, it was pitch dark, making it the perfect hour for hostile mobs to feast. The monsters had started to climb over the defensive wall surrounding the village, and were swarming the buildings inside. Many of the torches Steve had placed throughout the village were gone. He saw a shallow pit in front of him. He knew that a creeper must have exploded, destroying the lights and leaving the village in darkness. As Steve made his way out of his home, he gasped. A spider jockey was crawling up the walls of his house. The spider's red eyes glowed in the darkness as the skeleton sat on the aggressive arachnid. Steve knew that the spider jockeys were rare and could destroy him in seconds. A spider's vision was excellent, and the skeleton was a skilled hunter, which made a spider jockey a double threat. Steve felt his heart beat through his armor-clad body. He reached for his bow and arrows and took deep breaths. Within seconds, the skeleton spotted Steve and started to shoot. An arrow flew at Steve's chest, but bounced off the armor. He sprinted away from the spider as it leapt from the wall towards him, and the skeleton arrows come closer to Steve's unarmored legs. He ran as he narrowly avoided the arrows. Steve turned back and took aim at the spider, but wasn't able to kill the dreaded enemy as fast as he hoped. As more arrows flew towards Steve, he dodged them swiftly. At the same time, he reloaded his bow and shot again at the spider. Steve knew it was important to kill the spider before the skeleton. If the spider were alone without being weighed down by the bony skeleton, it could destroy him in an instant. Steve slowed down. With a clear eye, he shot an arrow at the spider. Thunk! Hit the spider right in the belly. The creature fell to the ground, and the skeleton launched a solo attack. With one more expert shot, Steve was able to take the skeleton down. He had defeated the spider jockey. He had never beaten such a tough enemy before. He grabbed the eye dropped by the spider and put it in his inventory, knowing it could be useful later. Bursting with energy from the conquest of the spider jockey, Steve set off to the village to fight the zombies with a bit more swagger in his step. With a bit more swagger in his step. Now he was a warrior. As he approached the village, Elliot the blacksmith ran past him toward his shop. "Help!" Elliot screamed. "You have the armor. You can beat the zombies." Steve knew Elliot had faith in him, but did he realize how scared Steve was? Steve saw a group of zombies surrounding a local village family as they tried to open the door to their home. The villagers tried to shield themselves, but the green, vacant-eyed zombies tore the doors from the houses, shops, and restaurants. They shattered glass windows and ripped roofs from the small homes. There was no place to hide. He wanted to follow Elliot back to his shop, but he knew hiding was a cowardly choice. Steve looked for a pumpkin-head iron golem. It was nowhere to be found. He walked over to a patch of grass. There he saw a large iron body, broken on the ground. Its pumpkin head lay next to the slain golem. His mammoth feet. A griefer must have came into the village and killed it with the intention of harvesting its iron. But he had no time to come up with theories on what happened to the iron golem. Steve had a sea of zombies racing towards him. Seeking cover behind a large tree, he hoped he could hide from the zombies, yet he wasn't safe there. Was a group of them making a quick approach? Steve charged at them with his iron sword, destroying two instantly. After his battle with the spider jockey, he felt confident he would win the fight quickly. He was wrong. Every minute, more zombies spawned. The injured zombies called for reinforcements as Steve was quickly outnumbered. He knew his armor couldn't protect him while he battled, but the sheer volume of zombies made him doubt that he could win. And Steve's sword were wearing out. His first iron sword had worn out and broken earlier in the fight. Now his last one was almost useless as well. Steve worried about the villagers. What if he couldn't defeat the zombies? Would all the villagers be turned into zombie villagers? For all of the items Steve has saved, he didn't have a potion of weakness, and he didn't even have enough time to craft an enchanted golden apple, the two items necessary to cure a zombie villager. Perhaps he could create an iron gate and put any zombie villagers behind it as a temporary jail. This would keep them from hunting him while he defeated the zombies. But time wasn't on Steve's side. He had to just keep fighting and hope he could figure out a way to save the villagers. Steve went back into his inventory and switched to a bow and arrow. As he shot arrows at the zombies, he was able to knock out a few, but they had an army. His bow and arrows was no match for a platoon of the Walking Dead. Steve needed another plan. He thought of leading the zombies to the ocean or a cliff, as he knew they weren't too smart and would probably trick them into running right off the cliff or drowning. He wasn't even sure if zombies could drown, though, and he was trapped in the village anyway. With these bloodthirsty zombies who were quickly outnumbering the villagers, to make matters worse, each villager who was scrambled into a zombie attacked instantly transformed into a zombie villager. Steve saw the village butcher still dressed in his white apron, but now turned monstrously green and rotten, pushing another zombie at the back of the crowd that continued to attack him. Steve's old villager friends were now zombies, ready to destroy one person who was trying to save and protect them. It was a losing battle. Steve had a chance and raced towards the zombies. He shot at them with his bow, taking them down quickly, so they didn't have a choice to call in reinforcements. Just when he thought he had won the battle, he saw one more zombie in the distance. As the zombie walked towards Steve, he shook in sheer terror. He had enough excitement for one night, and despite his heroics, he was still scared. His hand quivered while he fumbled with the bow. He could barely shoot an arrow. When he finally did, the arrow traveled slowly through the air and fell next to the zombie. The arrow crushed beneath the zombie's feet as he closed in on Steve. Steve felt his heart beating in his chest, but he couldn't let fear dominate his desire to save his friends. Then Steve heard Elliot the blacksmith call for help. He knew a zombie must have cornered Elliot. Steve couldn't let him down. He needed courage and strength. Steve put away the bow and arrow and grabbed the most powerful gold sword from his inventory. He carried the sword with his fist, but the powerful zombie grabbed the sword from Steve's hand and snapped the weapon in half. It dropped the sword on the grass and reached for Steve. With no time left to get a weapon from his inventory, he was defenseless. Steve began to sprint away from the enormous green-eyed creature from the night. He raced towards the familiar streets of the village, ran into Elliot's blacksmith shop, and slammed the door behind him. He figured that if he traded emeralds, he could get a new sword to defeat the zombies. But it was too late. Elliot the blacksmith was defeated and was spawning into a zombie. He had failed his friend. Steve was devastated and felt useless. Elliot was turning into a zombie, and Steve stood and stared in fear at his friend. Steve was heartbroken. He had spent so much time training and talking with Elliot, but he was now empty. He could hear Avery, the librarian, calling for help in the distance. He already let one villager friend down. He couldn't let it happen again. Steve had to get to Avery's librarian. Thud! Crack! He heard the door being ripped apart by the menacing zombies. He plotted an escape. Steve grabbed a pickaxe from his inventory and dug a hole in the ground. As he dug deeper, he could hear the door being ripped from his hinges. Once the zombies stepped foot into the shop, Steve crawled out towards the bottom of the shop and into the center of town. Emerging from the hole, he was cornered by a gang of zombies. Somehow, Steve was able to weave his way through the zombies and run out of the village, but the zombie mob followed him close behind. Avery's cry grew louder, and Steve knew he had to return to the village, but it was impossible. Looking back, he could see the zombies were close behind him. He shot arrows while he ran, striking a few of his enemies. As he made his way through the dark night, he tried to find a place to hide, but then he was cornered. He could make out a cave in the distance, although Steve was terrified of caves and had never been in one before. He was hoping he could hide there or find lava to attack the horde of zombies. They were getting closer, so Steve ran faster towards the cave. One zombie was inches from Steve's back. As it stepped closer, Steve trembled with fear, accidentally letting his chest plate fall off. Steve tried to pick it back up with a strong grasp. The zombie yanked the plate from Steve's hand and put the armor plate on its own chest. The zombie called out his gang, the chest plate to transform the ordinary zombie into an even more powerful zombie, since he was armored and couldn't be attacked. He also had an armored helmet, which meant unlike other zombies, he could live in daylight. Although the others would burn in the sun, the armored zombies leapt at Steve. He jumped back. Unarmed, Steve knew that he was the one to escape. He spent the morning mining. He had run into an area with lava and water, so he had enough obsidian in his bag to make a frame. He quickly stacked the jet black blocks together. As he lit them on fire, a purple mist rose through the air. Steve's portal to the Nether was complete. With a glance back at his village, Steve turned and made his escape from the zombies and tacked and into the Nether.